oppressors of Black people, they understand that if Black people come out in numbers, as we've done before, in record numbers at that, we know the power that we have in voting. And so, trying as best as they can to have different tactics. We had the grandfather clause before, it's the same beast in a different mask. So it's always been a struggle. It still is a struggle. So now it's our responsibility to figure out what do we do to counter that attack as we always have.
I honestly would say that with technology innovating, folks had to get more creative per se with the ways that they mitigated oppression. And with that being said, in the organizing context that we exist in now as young organizers, I think about how our ancestors had it, right? Like they had to rely on word of mouth. Yesterday was the anniversary of Fred Hampton's death. Um, and he organized at a time that relied on trust and that relied on vigilance. And so the fact that the digital footprint has expanded and that voters have the world at their fingertips, have access to information, have access to voter suppression one-on-one, I believe that these people, these legislators, these oppressors, had to get more creative in their approach and more strategic. And I think that only says to us that we have to level up. In the same way that TikTok created these algorithms that constantly educate us on a number of things, is the same way that we as organizers have to do more with what we were given, which is a lot more than our ancestors had.
RJ, do you have a comment? Oh, okay.
Go ahead, RJ.
Sorry, guys, yeah, I'm on the bus. But I first want to say, and I hate to use the word piggyback, but I piggyback off the comments from Anaya and Camilla. You're absolutely right. It's been proven time and time after time that once Black people in this country understand and step up to the bar that was already set by our counterparts, or and actually step up to that line, that they push the line and recreate the maps and the way that we reach power in this country, understanding the political structure and how power works. It's something that us as a culture of Black people are starting to now really realize, accept, and understand how to maneuver. And so now the other side, they're creating terms or regulations and ways to push back on us really just being activating the political power that every American has the right to. And so like Camilla said, there's we live in a time now to where especially technology is right at our hands. Education is right at our hands. It's no longer the fight or the struggle for equality in that education, because it's so much at hands. We have a smart device in our hand, and it can tell us any and everything at the drop of a dime or a push of a button, right? And so now that we understand who we need to target when it comes to things like our light bills and utility bills in our communities that affect us, and know and understand that the difference between the mayor and the county commissioner and how local voting works, and now we're activating those powers that we have. They are finding ways to push back on it. So we have voter suppression laws that's been passed over in our 49 states, all right, to push us back. We have it now that where you don't want to feed people or give people water when they're standing in these massive lines just to vote and exercise those rights. And so they have to find any way, any possibility that they can use to fight back against us. But it's our duty, our obligation, to continue to stick to what we know, stick to voting, stick to being active in the political process, and to continue to voice our opinions.
I also wanted to say something to in regards to what Camilla said too. As Black people, I want to make sure we understand we can't be so naive to how technology is. Like technology is not just a pro. Of course, we have to be creative and things of that nature, but as Black people, we tend to overshare on social media platforms. And one thing that, historically our people had in their advantage when it came to just word of mouth is things stayed within the Black community. Like people who needed to know how we were going to move as Black people, that's who knew. But now that we have technology, now that we have these platforms that are not just getting to people nationally, but internationally, information is falling not just in our hands as Black people, but in the hands of our oppressors. So we have to be very strategic in what information we're putting out there in regards to our next moves that we're having politically or how we are going about it. And we have to be creative on, what platforms we have for just us, how we want to move for just us. Like understanding, Instagram, that's not controlled by us. TikTok is not controlled by us. Facebook is not controlled by us. You feel me? So, going outside the box, not just utilizing the platforms that are at our fingertips, but let's create some new platforms that we can actually have on lock that we use just for us so that information can stay within our community so we know what we're going to do going forward.
Good point. So one thing that we've often seen, especially when we talk about a generational thing, with people not trying to engage in the political process. So why do you guys think that people still choose not to engage in the political process? A lot of people, especially past the midterms or even before then, talk about how like young voters specifically don't turn out, they're not engaged, they're getting outvoted by the older people, demographics that turn out to most elections. Why do you guys feel like people still choose not to engage in the political process?
Oh, pick me. So I'm gonna start by saying this. First of all, most of our people don't completely understand the political process. And when we don't understand the political process and where we sit and being able to have that power, we neglect it. We take it for granted and we feel like one, our vote does not matter. So when it comes to first of all about voting, some of the things that we're seeing as organizers out here in the streets, out here making people face to face is that it's hard to come and talk to somebody about voting when they're worried about how they're gonna pay their bills, how they're gonna keep a roof over their head, how they're gonna put clothes in their back, what their child's daycare is costing, how their health care is. Can they go see a doctor when they need to? And so when we understand what who we have to target in those particular situations to affect those immediate day-to-day needs, then we understand the political process and understand why voting is so important. So when we understand that when we're concerned about our streets and how we have potholes in our streets and we can barely drive and we bend it up our rims, or while we drive down our streets and they're so dark at night and we can't see what's going on the side of the roads, and while we have these dilapidated properties in our neighborhoods, then we know that we have to attack our city council and city councilmen who we vote for. When we try to understand why our light bills and our water bills and power bills are the way they are, and understand then we need to attack our public commission boards because they vote on those things and they set those regulations. We know how to use that political power that we have. We know what polls that we have to rush, what elections that we really need to be in voting, who we really need to have representing us down in city council or on those boards. And so I think back to my point, I think that we don't completely understand the political process first. So there's a lot of voter education that continuously needs to happen in our communities because they don't teach that in our civic classes like they should. They don't teach that in our schools like it should be taught. And so we come out with just a minute scope of what we think the political process is in our communities. We think voting for the president or voting for Congress is everything on these national elections, and don't understand just how vital and important that local elections and voting is to us.
Naya?
Yeah, I'll definitely follow that. I definitely agree with what you said, RJ. Also, I feel like, and I can speak for my generation in particular, we're traumatized by politics. There's a certain trauma that is held with politics and politicians when it comes to mistrust, when it comes to us again coming out in numbers, people pushing, the young generation to the polls, and then when we put people in these positions of power, they do not uphold the things that got them in that position of power when they're campaigning the promises that they held. So now it's like in my opinion, it's another form of like suppression in a sense for us. It's like, dang, you got me out here voting for you, and now we got you in here. What are you doing with this position? Because you're not reflecting me. You're not reflecting my people. So that's that is another way. But also, just like how IJ said, the federal presidential, election, that's not going to determine what's going on exactly in Mecklenburg County or in Wake County, or specifically in Texas. Of course, that has an impact, but to a certain degree. So that education definitely still needs to be pushed out as hard as possible. It's definitely our responsibility because it's purposeful that it's not talked about in depth in the schools. Like all of that is on purpose. So we definitely have to make sure we fill in those shoes that are purposely voided.
Right.
Yeah, I honestly I completely agree with Anaya, um, as well as RJ, always RJ. But I'll certainly say that we're exhausted. We're tired. We're tired. We're tired of our culture being appropriated. We're tired of being the blueprint. We're tired of being the example. We're tired of Black death being circulated only in return to ask for our vote. Like, it's wild. And just realistically speaking, that torch that our ancestors carried, like, we have to carry, we have to keep lighted, because it really, the day to day can really drown out. And the Black experience is an example in America. The Black failure, as well as the Black success, is all under a magnifying glass. But in the prospect of intersectional communities of color, transgender communities, right? Like, I don't want to speak about Blackness as this overarching thing. There are intersections that voting conversations have to seep into the crevices of too. And I believe that there's this like band-aid approach to voting rights, right? For other like ethnicities and other cultures and races. Whereas the Black community, we have to really get creative. For example, the Collard Green Caucus, right? Black Voters Matter said, dang, how can we relate to our people quickly, but also drive home the importance of sustenance, and feeding our families. And so I really love that about Black people, is that like we have no choice but to be creative. We have no choice but to really garner that expertise and that lived experience and wrap it all into one. And I think that our ancestors would be very proud of one person turning out to the polls. And, also in regard to the earlier question, right, about like the turnout of Black folk, we're talking about Jim Crow laws that existed when they thought Black people couldn't read, right? We're talking about a time where they literally thought that we were incompetent of a Black Wall Street, or of the ability to be the blueprint for fashion, although we already were, right? So like the way that politics is trying to really outnumber us, the revolution is not televised. Like, there's nothing that these oppressive laws can do. But I do like the sentiment in which Black Voters Matter is honest about, is that we can't out organize this. We need help. White allies, where are you at? You know what I mean? Like our community who has privilege, we need your help. Like, we need these intersectional conversations on platforms like TikTok, and we need constant rhetoric and praxis that is actually applied in this context.
Yep, 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 absolutely. And I'll add on to that. I'll say this too. Um, man, niggas tired of people coming into our communities when it's time for an election. When it's time for you to get reelected, and it's time for you to go back in the office. You know what I'm saying? Where you at every day? You know what I'm saying? Niggas is dying and getting killed and suffering and dealing with issues every day. And so don't come into the neighborhood just when you want to get elected and come in bringing your food trucks and trying to feed and do this. But I need to see you there in July when it ain't no election going on. I need to see you there at the local block parties. I need to see you there when somebody get killed. You know what I'm saying? And not just when it's something for the main media. And so when we do that, when we find ourselves relatable to the candidates that's claiming that they want to represent us or see them in our communities, then we can start to trust more. You know what I'm saying? It's no longer are we sitting behind just a coon in a picture that's gonna dance and do a dog and pony show for what they think that they can relate to our communities on. No, we need people that's in our communities that are having real conversations with us, like, and understand really what we dealing with, understand really what the struggle is about, and not just something that when you come to the neighborhood, you do your photo ops, you knock on a couple of doors, you take a few pictures, and then you leave and go over to the east side of town where everything all good at. No, we need some people that's actually from the community, who live in the community and understand what the community needs. And so, and once we start to get some people that are really relatable, I take myself for example. That's why when we out here in these streets and we knocking on these doors, I got my do rag on. I'm out here. You know what I'm saying? I'm dressed like I dress every day. It ain't no time to put on no costume just to try to approach people, because people ain't feeling that no more. That ain't it. That ain't it. That ain't it. The preachers, and this is coming from a preacher. The preachers ain't preaching. That preaching stuff, it ain't doing it for us no more, because we understand what reality is, right? The politician that what we've set up to think a politician is and who he is, it's not working no more. So y'all got to come to us with the real. You know what I'm saying? Y'all got to talk to us about real situations, real issues, and real problems. Going back to what I said, how you gonna help me right now? How you gonna help me deal with my issue that I'm dealing with right now? Because you talking about running to the poll, me taking off work, right, to go to the polls to vote, because they only open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which is my main work time, which is inflicting the time when I got to pick up my kids from school, and I got and we got practices and things like that. So what's going to really talk about to my day-to-day issues? Y'all excuse me, I kind of emotional about this, because we out here in the streets right now. We out here in Georgia in a runoff, right? In a runoff where we trying to get people to come out and realize that, like, you know what I'm saying, this stuff, the stuff that we talking about, the expansion of Medicaid, you know what I'm saying, what we talking about right now, like minimum wage being raised right here in the state of Georgia. I mean, Georgia has the lowest minimum wage in the country. You know what I'm saying? So we talking about issues like that. How can I go down in Valdosta and talk to those people who are down there who are still making $5.25 an hour? You know what I'm saying? Working on some of their jobs. Like, how can I talk to these people about voting? Them folks don't give a damn about voting right now. Them folks are caring about, how am I gonna pay my bills? How am I gonna make it to even see
Mhm.
the next election, who get elected?
And you know what, RJ? You know what? I really want to uplift you and validate you right now, because to ask somebody for their vote is to ask somebody for their autonomy. You don't know who you're speaking to. You don't know how the system has failed them. And what I love about Black Voters Matter is that when we door knock, when we talk to voters, we're not there to override their experience. We're there to ask how the system failed them, to validate the system failing them, because it is a lie and a hoax that this system is perfect and that it exists to be perfect. So your rage is valid and it's powerful right now, and you are representing the people that you are serving. And I'm just so proud of you.
Appreciate it. And that's all I want to represent. You know, we're at a time now, man, to making ourselves and propping ourselves up to be accepted by people who don't give a damn about anything that we got going on, who only care about our vote when it only matters to them about getting their next job, getting their next paycheck. To be honest with you, and helping them establish more power, it's over with. And I think what we're walking into now, when I think that's leading into our next question is the ability of passing the torch, right? Of a new generation coming in who thinks different, who looks different, who walks different, and who exists in a different society that still deals with the same conflicts and the same traumas from years of past.
All right. We got to move on to the next topic. Moving forward, no disrespect to y'all. I love what y'all talking about. We can go on all night. But we got to keep it each like to 10 minutes. So just keep that in mind. But like you said, RJ, with the next topic being said, we're gonna get on to criminal justice. In 2021, Black people were 28% of those killed by police, despite only being 13% of the population. In states like Georgia, we witnessed the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. We also witnessed DA Jackie Johnson, who was initially assigned to the case of Ahmaud Arbery, was voted out of office after mishandling the case. With an important Senate runoff election important with you on the ground, RJ, and you guys who just came out of the midterm elections working down in your state, this election is definitely have a national impact. What does reimagining police look like to you guys? And also, just to say the other question, if you guys want to tie it into your first response to the first question, what would you want to see in a candidate take a stand on? Is reform possible with a broken system?
Okay, so if I could take this one, so I am an abolitionist, just to be very transparent with everybody on the call. And what got me into this work in 2016, my cousin Dion Smalls was murdered by an off-duty police officer in Brooklyn, New York, a Black officer at that. And so that's when I really realized the system. It doesn't really matter if you're Black or white. It's a system issue. It's a system issue. And so to ask about the re-imaging or reimagining of policing, I feel like it's sort of a loaded question, because if the root is corrupt, then you have to pull it out from the root. You can't expect for good harvest to come from bad soil. You feel me? That doesn't add up. So that's when you have to really start thinking, okay, like just taking out policing, period. What does a safe community for Black people look like? Like, let's really get to the bottom of it. What is it that quote unquote police officers are supposed to be doing for the community, and what are they actually doing? What is it that we need versus what is it that we're getting? Like, not only having these conversations, but really, stepping outside of the box of reforming and really talking about, like, what is true liberation for Black people? What does safety really look like for Black people, in which we are actually keeping our lives, in which we're not just surviving, but we're living, because those are two very different things. And I feel like as Black people, we have been so accustomed to surviving this system. But what would it look like if we had an actual system that worked for us, benefited us, and allowed us to actually live? Like, it shouldn't be a system in which I have to tell my brother at a young age, my Black young brother, this is what's going to happen when you get older and you get pulled over. He shouldn't have to take off his do-rag. He should have the freedom to go to the grocery store in a wife beater in the summertime because it's hot. But no, he can't do that, because he's gonna be perceived as a gangster or something lesser than if he gets pulled over. These conversations shouldn't be in a world, in a community, in a society, in a nation that our ancestors literally died in, came in involuntarily. So, I I feel like that was a lot, but I say that all to say, scratch policing, period. Let's really reimagine what a safe community for Black people looks like.
Can I say that was perfect? And I'm coming out the gate, period, to say abolition, period. Like, there's no there's no sense of remorse, or I'm not apologetic about that, just like I'm not apologetic about my Blackness, because as an Afrofuturist, I believe in pathways that we exist and thrive in the future, and not that we just live in a future that we exist and thrive, a future that is Black, that also gets credit for being Black, that is not appropriated, that lives, that does not die. Although I don't believe any of us die in vain, I believe in an abolitionist future. We get our flowers right now. We don't get our flowers when we're dead. We get our flowers while we're living, and we get our flowers before we're living. And I think that that's eternal. And there's so much power in that. And if we're really talking about surveillance and the state sanctioned violence, which is what policing is, we're talking about slavery. We're talking about how we literally were policed by folks who were trying to give us back to someone who believed that they owned us. We're talking about a time when we were believed to be a certain fraction of a human being, which still proves to be true, with the way that our Black death is it's essentially it's trauma porn, right? Like, you don't see other deaths being circulated on mass media like Black people's. You don't see, the gratuitous violence that's done to a Black body being the top of cinema. You don't see this in the context of other races. And so I'm really fired up about this conversation and this topic, because there's so many nuances, and I'm really tired of conversations about policing being a trend. Like, George Floyd was not, I mean, while some people do believe it was a pivotal moment, it was not, because people are still being lynched in the South. Sandra Bland, like there's so many cases of police brutality that go under the radar. But I also want us to think about, and I want to bring up the recent death of Takeoff, right? Like when we're talking about police brutality, we also have to talk about gun violence. We have to talk about what that looks like within our own communities. I personally do not believe in Black on Black crime. I believe that that is a fable, that is a lie. I think that Black people, violence in the Black community is heightened compared to that of other communities, and the data proves this. But I think that when we talk about violence, period, and we talk about policing, we have to talk about alternative methods of healing. What's really at the root of this? Trauma. Generational trauma is the result of these shootings and policing, period. And like you said, Anaya, you really got it at the core when you talked about how what did Ice Cube say? Black police showing out for the white cop. That's what I think of when I think about sanctioned violence. I think about how when there's a system of surveillance in place, just like Fred Hampton was murdered and assassinated by his own kind, set up by his own race, by his own someone he trusted. We have to really understand that white supremacy functions within our own communities. And it's up to us to really identify that generational trauma. And I'm going on a whole spiel right now, but I'll bring it back to the point that I think it's more than a conversation about policing. I think it's about healing trauma. When we're talking about disparities within the Black community, because I rebuke the term Black on Black crime, we're talking about having to fight for existing and thriving in the future. And what that looks like is having these conversations and saying, you know what, Granny, at Christmas, being like, you calling my hair nappy? That was anti-Black, or the you calling me a bit darker than my other cousin, that's kind of anti-Black, because that's really where it starts, is the anti-Blackness that we witness in our own communities. And it's okay, because white supremacy prevails in certain situations, but we will not let it. And I will get off my soapbox.
Yeah, I dig it, man. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet, man. I'm a little Boosie fan, and you know what his song say about the police.
RJ,
I'm gonna leave it like that. Um,
RJ.
so I'm gonna start with I'm there like this, man. The whole system gotta burn. The whole system. We talking about we can't reimagine something because you still build yourself off those basic blocks of which something is built on when we're reimagining that one thing. So we got to change the name of it. We got to change the thought of it, the system, everything that touches it and is connected to it. It has to burn down. It has to come to the ground and be rebuilt. And not even from those ashes, we go to new soil, and create something new, that better suits, not only just our people, but the human race.
So I also say, when it comes to police programs and like community programs, I cannot stand them. I feel like when I talk about programs, I'm talking about the police programs where they go out into the communities and they have our young Black boys and girls in bouncy houses and trying to have a kumbaya session with these police officers or whatever. And I'll tell you one specific reason why. And this is just a case scenario. If you have these kids out here giving them this false ideology that when they see any police officer, they can trust them. You
Mhm.
out here having Billy, shaking hands with Demarcus down here, saying, if ever you need me, son, you come call me. And then later on, he meets Bob, and that's the racist cop down the street. He gonna expect for Bob to help him out. And when he comes over to him, try to give him a hug or something, try to dap him up, it's an issue. So it gives this false narrative that they can be trusted. It gives a false narrative and a false imagery, that is something that it's not. And it's trying to build community and build trust when there
It's
is
the
none.
devil, Anaya. It's literally the devil. It uses the same tricks and I'm not trying to get religious on y'all, but it uses the same tricks as the devil, right? Come on, I'm your friend. I'm nice to you. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to protect you. I'm here to serve you. I got your back. Call me, dial 911 when you need me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Times we've dialed 911 and the case is worse once the police arrive, right? I'm killed because
The one that I was about to say, the one that called them was the one I get shot.
I get shot, right? And so now I'm walking around with this false, like I'm in a trauma now. I don't know what to do. Like, do I what now? I'm afraid when something happens. Do I call the police? Should I call the police? Or what do I do? So you're right, man. It's a trick of the devil, man. Like I said, the police, bro. Yeah, for real.
Can we go back to the little books?
That's
That's
gonna be a
fine.
whole nother panel.
Look,
Hey,
okay. I'm sorry. RJ, we'll
You know,
talk about that offline. We'll talk about it offline.
okay,
PvP, but you already stand on it.
so just a quick message for everybody who's watching. Early voting has already ended in Georgia, but there's still time to get out and vote tomorrow for the upcoming Senate runoff election. If you need information, please head over to blackvotersmatterfund.org/vote to find your polling location, to learn more about who's on your ballot, and give you all the information you need. So with that being said, we are now almost halfway through, and we are on the next topic, which is going to be student loan debt. So in 2021, student loan debt reached around $1.7 trillion. The cost for attending college is a heavy burden for millions of people, and Black and African American bachelor degree holders have an average of $52,000 in student loan debt. Black voters continuously show up and show out to get their needs met, such as student loan debt cancellation, but are consistently disappointed. So what's the point of voting if nobody shows up for us when it comes to our community needs? I know we've often heard this question time and time again, specifically with Black voters. Some Black voters feel like, what are they giving me? Like, we are not seeing much change in our community, or you say you're going to do all these things once you get elected, then it seems like you're not doing that, all the way from the president to maybe down ballot races. So what do you guys feel about this question?
I definitely feel like I think what's the point of voting? I just want to kind of dissect the sentence. What's the point of voting is a very valid question. I don't want to rule that out. I think it's really valid. Like you said, RJ, when you have kids and you got to weigh like, your shift that you're going to be working at the time the polls are open compared to these laws that are going to make sure that they're closed by the time you get off. Like, what do you do? But I also do feel like when we're talking about the context of debt, we also have to understand the concept of financial literacy. And I want to give the context of Black Wall Street, right? The reason that they burned Black Wall Street down goes back to what I was saying about the assumption that Black folk didn't have the potential to be able to read or write or succeed. And so that is why, that's what the point is. The point is for us to build generational wealth. It's for us to build a system in which our families can thrive and exist and create that pathway for the future that I was talking about. So personally, that's what I think. I also think that the DOJ needs to quit playing. I got the email that I qualify for my loans to be excused. So I'm gonna need y'all to work out whatever's going on, because I worked really hard and I went to school in the summer in college to get a degree that I'm still paying for, right? It's just, first of all, the education model of America compared to other countries is crazy. Also, in healthcare, I'm gonna jump a little bit ahead. It's a crazy that we don't want to ride an ambulance, that we would literally prefer to walk because of how much it costs. But I don't know. How do y'all feel about that? I mean, do y'all share my sentiment? I just think like the financial literacy is something that the Black community, I think that we have to really garner and embed more in our intentions.
So I'll say, I definitely supporting what you're saying. Um, for me, you feel me? There's different levels, right? So what's the point of voting? You want to come at the system at every angle possible. You want to try to do that, but voting can't be everything. And I think that's a big disconnect too. A lot of people think that just voting is like the bread and butter. Once you vote, you're going to get everything. That's not going to be the case. Like, there has to be certain levels that people need to be willing to reach in order to get not just freedom, but liberation for Black people, to be liberated from this concept of debt. Like there's things that we really need to break down and understand. We need to be okay with getting to our liberation the PG way, the PG-13 way, the rated R way, and the rated X way. You feel me? Like that's the only way that we can truly get to those to that goal. And our ancestors showed it to us. They were willing to do whatever it took. They were willing to get arrested time and time again. They were willing to die, put their lives on the line. And they were doing it in three-piece suits and high heels coming straight from church to do that. So it's like us, you feel me? We need to have some more hard skin and understand that yes, come out to vote. But in my mind, I'm not gonna go to the voting polls and be like, I'm gonna cast my ballot. That's it. Y'all gonna see me in 2 years. Y'all gonna see me in 4 years. And that's what a lot of our people think, like that's the case. But we need to get more gully. And when I say that, like we need to get more hard. We need to understand like that's not all that it's going to take. And we need to understand like we need to be able to do any, like by any means necessary. That's not just something that people say. Like we actually mean that by any means necessary. And just to tie this in too, when people say the revolution will be televised, yes, some of it will, but some of it won't. And we don't want all the revolution to be televised because the first people that's going to be looking at is going to be the people that's trying to counterattack us. So it's like some things we need to keep on the low, like underground type stuff. Like nobody needs to know it's on a hush hush. All you see is my eyes type stuff, like moving with the swiftness. And I say that to say like, there's a certain type of um risk that our generation, I feel like, sometimes doesn't have. Like we like, and I'm talking on myself. Like I won't say on myself because I'm with the smoke. I'm with the smoke at any time. But there's a lot of my generation that is not willing to take those risks. And if you want that big of a reward, which is true liberation, you have to be willing to match that with a certain level of risk. And we all need to be at that level. And I'll be the first one out there. So
True, true, true. I'm gonna start with this. I'm gonna say this. Guess what race is in the lead for having student debt? And it's not by a mistake, right? I think what we have to first start with on the genesis of understanding the falsified, I don't even know, the hope and the dream that was sold to us almost as the police does, that you graduate high school, you go to college, you get your degree, you're successful. And for so long, that's been the rhetoric that has been sold to us in the hood all our lives. Go to school, go to college, and you done made it. You're gonna have a house on the hill with a picket fence. And that has proven itself to be the one of the biggest lies that you can tell kids as they grow up. And we found ourselves now more people are going to college. Yes, that's a great thing. More people are being educated. More people are being exposed to different walks of life, different people from across the country, and building connections and making networks. But more of our people are coming out of college with worse credit and more debt than they ever would have had if they've never attended college, right? So I think there's an understanding that we have to get with our people that, first of all, college is not for everybody, right? And the debts that you acquire going to college, it's not something that you would definitely want to be in. We're not taught in school that you need to get these scholarships, that you need to make, that you don't want to have to pay, that the federal loan and the unsubsidized loan and the parent plus loan, even though you're getting the money quick, you getting the refund once a semester, and you got your $1,300 or a couple $100 in your pocket after you get your check. It's not helping you. It's causing you more damage than it is pushing you forward, because we graduate college, right? And we walk out of those four walls and those four doors to meet the real world. We understand that you got to really compete for those jobs, that you really have to go out there, and everybody else is competing along with you. So now you have all this debt. And what do? We start to fall behind. We come out already with 1 foot behind instead of 1 foot forward. And so when we start to talk about this student loan debt, and why is it crazy that people wouldn't want student loan debt? And I questioned on that. I pondered that for a while. Like, why would it be one side if everybody's going to college and everybody's being successful and everybody's been to college? Why wouldn't you want the federal government to forgive student debt and student loans? That's because student loans and student debts are only affecting a marginalized group of people in this country, right? And those who don't have those concerns, the elites, the 3%ers, the 1%ers who don't deal with those issues, who don't deal with those because they're not coming out, because a lot of them going to college is merely an option for them, because most of them are inheriting their parents 500 business and companies. Most of them are walking into executive positions with barely even a high school education, but they walk into these prominent positions and they're able to run and they're able to feed their families and to come out of a generational, they don't experience the same generational curses that our people deal with. And so when we start talking about student loans and student debts, and when it comes to voting, that's why it is more important to vote. That's why it's so important that we do get out and vote, that we vote people into the Senate, into the Congress, who are going to vote on bills to help the bill like Biden just passed, to try to forgive these student debts. But I'm gonna just leave that right there, because we just had a whole conversation about that on the bus today, and it got real noise on here about it. So, student debts, it is what it is. Once again, I'm gonna go back to what I told you earlier, Naya. It's a trick of the devil, and I'm standing on that firm. We can move
All right.
on.
All right, y'all. So this is gonna be the last topic before we get to the closing question, closing statement. So it's gonna be on the topic of healthcare that Camilla had mentioned a little bit earlier. So expanding Medicaid reduces the cost of prices of medicine and promotes safety precautions to reduce the risk of catching COVID, which is important issues when it comes to healthcare. So how important is the Senate when it comes to tackling these issues around healthcare? And if the Democrats already control the Senate, why do we need to get out and vote again in the Georgia runoff? Why do people need to get out and vote?
Because your life depends on it. When you start talking about the expansion of Medicaid, what insulin costs, what you pay when you go to the pharmacy, or when you pay you go to your doctor, your life literally depends on it. When we talk about the Senate being already Democratic, yes, but what good is it to have a star player with no team? It helps you none, right? And so yeah, we have a Democratic president. We say Joe Biden is in office, right? But what happens when Joe Biden tries to pass laws and bills, and they're knocked down by the Senate, or they don't make it past the floor, right? So it's detrimental that we keep that majority in the Senate, and I don't care, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 points. We have to keep that power and maintain it on that side of the Senate. But I think another part to your question was, when we start talking about the expansion of Medicaid, and what it means to our people, and what it means to people all across this country, we have to look at what the major pharmaceutical companies are doing, and how they are buying people, and how there are lobbyists who literally get out on the floor and they lobby for those companies to keep the prices of of prescriptions and of medical care the way that it is. It's no coincidence that one of the first things that Donald Trump done in office was reform, or kick out, so to say, Obamacare. That helped millions of Americans. And so why don't people want us to have good health care? I think that's a question that we should pose, and I would love to hear people thought in the chat. Why is it that is something, to a basic human need and right, to live and to survive? And I'll tell you, it's one thing. It's money. It's money. For those who reap the benefit of holding insulin and charging insulin $200, $500 for prescription when it only costs $5 to $10 to make a vial of insulin. And I speak for that because I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I'm there on the one-on-one of understanding what that cost is and what it faces, and knowing that most of our people don't work with jobs that have benefits, or that have the benefits of Medicaid. So it costs them when they go to the doctor, and they can't afford to pay for these prescriptions. They can't afford to go to the doctor and pay the fees it costs just to see the doctor. So the doctor can tell them to go and get a prescription that they can't afford to buy. So y'all take it, sis. Go ahead, take it.
Anaya, do you want to go? Many thoughts, many thoughts. I'm gonna come from the perspective of Texas right now, where it is literally illegal to get an abortion, and it is illegal to, apparently, in my opinion, miscarry a child and need an abortion, where it's illegal to literally have a uterus, because a uterus happens to produce these functions, right? To make these functions. Capitalism, right? Like, and I go back to my CX policy debate days when I realized that the body is capital, right? Like labor is capital. Everything about exerting energy is capital. And so it's like I said, for folks to literally beg someone to not call an ambulance when they're dying is the livelihood of America. For a woman or a person, for a person to face being fired because they are getting a hysterectomy, because in their state it's illegal to have an abortion, and they don't have access to healthcare, so therefore they don't have birth control, they're fired from their job because they needed hysterectomy. Or someone who is married with 3 children and can't support another child, or their child miscarries, or is in the case of rape or incest. I mean, there are just so many instances that it is unfathomable to think that we are taxed to literally, I mean, literally, when you think about it, what does your toothpaste cost? Does your toothbrush cost? Does your soap cost? Does the sponge you use to wash yourself cost? Like, everything about hygiene and upkeep of the human body is capitalized on. And so I think there are several approaches to this. I think that as a Black community, what we can do is invest in our people, right? I think that when we're talking about healthcare, we also have to understand white Western approaches to medicine. We need to invest in Black doulas, period. We need to invest in holistic healing ways of birth giving. We need to really look for that in politicians who are trying to run for a seat. We need to ask them about their stance on restorative justice approaches, mandates, right, that make sure that hospitals and healthcare providers are abiding by the working class. And while I say that, I'm pro-union. We need to unionize out here in these streets, because the only way to ensure that Medicare, Medicaid, all of these things expand is to really understand the root. Like Anaya said, the only way that we get to the problem of these things is the root. Do I have the answer to big pharma and opioid epidemics, and the domino effect that comes with the capitalization of existing? No. But I do think that your vote is everything, and these things are literally on the ballot. And I know that we say that and it sounds cliche and it's repetitive, but the truth is that right now in the state of Texas, if someone even suspects that I'm aiding my friend in an abortion, I can be sued. There's a bounty on my head for $10,000. It is literally a federal crime for me to assist a friend of mine who may have miscarried a child and needs an abortion, a life-saving abortion. I literally can go to prison right now. And I also I also can't be transgender in the state of Texas, and the list goes on. And so I just say all that to say that the topic of I think all of these questions are really stimulating. Good job, Gabby. Good job, Comms. Y'all did the thing, because there's really no way to answer these questions without getting to the root of them. And I think that the root of them, like Gabby said in the chat so inconspicuously, is capitalism. And until we realize that Black labor is capital, that our bodies to civil society are capital, we're really stuck. And turning out to the polls, unfortunately, is one of the remedies of that. Like Anaya said, it's not it's one.
It's one. Absolutely.
And I'll wrap it up and be very quick, just to touch a little bit on what Camilla said in regards to abortion being illegal in Texas. It's crazy because people really think that because abortion is illegal in different states, that abortion isn't happening. It's taking away the safe way for abortion to take place. But before abortion became illegal, abortion was still going on. We gonna find a way. Like, if you guys ever seen For Colored Girls, there's one story, like, it's a perfect depiction of what Black people go through, Black women go through on a regular basis, what we're going to do because we are resourceful beings. Like, that just is what it is. But to wrap it up, man, honestly, Georgia, please come out for the runoff, man. I know we can't talk specifically on who we want, but I need for y'all to really think in y'all head, like, who do I want to see? Who can I say looks and talks and has the same intelligence level as me? There's gonna be one person, I hope, that y'all see and reflect and just tie into a little bit more than the other. But I really, really, really want you guys to go out there. Runoff is now. Please, y'all, make your voices heard. You feel me? Black people, make your voices heard. Understand that your life is on the ballot, your body's on the ballot. Like, so much is on the ballot. Really do your research, but really listen to what these candidates are saying, because some of them are just talking just to talk, just to say something. And some of them are actually talking because, they know what they're talking about. So educate yourself, do research, and cast that ballot.
All right, y'all. So here are the closing questions for each of you guys to answer, whoever wants to answer. What do you think the older generation gets wrong about the younger generation? And what do you think the younger generation gets wrong about the older generation?
I have some points on that one, and I'll keep them pretty short. I'll try to, at least. I would say one thing that I feel like the older generation gets wrong about the younger generation, and this is from the perspective that, I understand that there are some that think like this, but I'm representing myself. And I'll say the older generation, I feel like, don't trust us enough as the younger generation for the torch to be passed to us. They don't feel like we're strong enough, or, we have what it takes in order to do that. They feel like they need to be more hands-on than they think than they really do have to. But the older generation, they deserve some time to rest. Like, they pulled their leg, and I feel like a lot of them don't understand that there are seasons. And right now, society, oppression, it's the same thing, but it's in different masks. In our generation, we know what it looks like better than anyone else because we live it every day. You feel me? So there's different tactics and different creativities and different perspectives that we can add in that this older generations can't. And I'll say, from in a flipped way, the younger generation, sometimes we feel like the older generation doesn't have anything else to offer. But what they have is an abundance of wisdom and an abundance of experience, an abundance of skills and things that they have gone through, in which we can take heed to so that we don't have to repeat it in our generation. So, meeting somewhere in the middle, I feel like, is what we've been consistently trying to do, find that perfect sweet spot where it's like we gain the wisdom, the knowledge, the experience from the older generation, and then we bring in the passion, the new, enthusiasm, the energy level of the younger generation, really tying that in so that we can, keep pressing forward to liberation.
I will say that because I know RJ gonna take us to church, so I'm gonna let him take us to church at the end of this. I have thoughts about church. No, I'm kidding. No, but truly, I feel as though I completely agree with Anaya. Like we kind of share a brain in a sense because um I get it. I get it. And I'm an old soul. Like I feel like I resonate a little bit. Like I get it with the idea that like like, you know, we've been holding on to this for so long. It's our baby, you know. There's some hesitance and some anxiety about it. Um, but I also in return, I think something that we don't really get or respect sometimes as a younger generation is the fact that like the older generation has been there and bought the t-shirt like several times. They've been there, they've done that, and they bought the t-shirt. And I didn't really understand what that meant when my mom would say it to me when I was younger. But the older I get, the more I hear her voice. And I think that there are several things that the older generation has had to face and endure in terms of crisis, right? Like when we're talking about a generational gap, we're talking about, for example, millennials, right? Millennials saw the internet. Millennials saw the HIV and AIDS epidemic. The millennials saw 9/11, right? When we're talking about Gen Z, we're talking about a generation that saw COVID-19, that saw a recession, that saw like several traumatic events. And I think until we as different generations can have respect for the traumatic instances in which we faced as a country, I think that there's always going to be kind of a divide because until we have respect for each other's individual experience, it's going to be really hard to politically align. With that being said, I will say that something that I think we all can take away from in this domestic conversation about policy and voting is that, and something that I tweeted today that has been heavy on my heart is that like none of us are free until we all are free globally. And so long as Palestine is facing genocide, like so long as other countries are enduring civil war over religion or resources, we are not free as Black people. Like this the oppression is wide and vast. And I think generationally we can take that away from each other, that struggle is shared, that it's not chopped up and given to each other in different instances. It's shared, and this bridge called our back is something that we have a collective uh, accountability to help render. And so, yeah, I just say all that to say that, like, I'm here for Gen Z. I'm proud of Gen Z. I don't believe these statistics that state that the youth don't turn out because I saw lines at every college in Texas waiting, excited to vote. And so I have a lot of faith in Gen Z, and I have a lot of faith in the future. I'm ready to give it over to the youth because I know that they have the willpower and the tenacity to really see more than we see. And I respect the qualms of our ancestors because, like I said, they didn't have smartphones, so of course they have kind of a disconnect in the algorithm in which we figure it out.
Ditto, ditto, ditto. Just sitting here listening to you talk to me, the only thing I can think of is a quote from my great frat brother, Dr. Martin Luther King, and he would have said, a threat to justice, an injustice anywhere. I'm sorry, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so, as long as people are struggling anywhere in this world, it's a threat to how we live. And so, you're right, man. We'll never be free. In speaking on the generation between the old and the young and the now, and um we say it in the black church all the time, to serve this present age, it's my calling to fulfill. And that's why I stand so proud. I live in this work. I love what I do every day. I was just telling Cliff this today. I can wake up and literally do this every day and not even have to get paid for it as long as I was taken care of. But we're gonna have to keep doing what we do as organizers, guys, and that's out organize the organizer, right? We're gonna have to continue to lay a blueprint that for the ones who are coming behind us can completely walk into what we're doing and take over without a flinch, without any confusion, but they know exactly where to go. They know exactly what leaves to turn over. And I think that's where our generation has the gap from the old to us to those behind us. is there was a halt in the passing of the torch. And our people are such a proud people, and our ancestors were they're such proud peoples that the wins that they gained, the doors that they opened, they got in and they held that stuff so close to themselves that they did not want to let it go and don't want to share the space. And that's why we live in a time now to where there's a gap, where we're coming into these positions where we don't know the difference between what the county commissioner does, the mayor, or the city council. And it's because our people have got into these positions and they've held it, and they don't go back and they're not teaching our youngs in our communities what to do, how to do, and what the effects of doing it. And so if we really want to bridge the gap, first of all, we're going to have a little grace and space, as Natasha says all the time, from the old to the young, because we're different generations. And like you said, we've had different traumas, we've seen different things, but we all have an experience with struggle in this country. And so when we all realize that we all have a battle to fight, it's the same war, but we all have different battle fronts, then we'll understand that all of this work is cohesive together, and that we got to continue to pass it on, pass it on, pass it on. And understand too, like you said, there's wisdom to learn from the old, and then there's a lot to gain from the young as well.
And that was it for our discussion. Thank you to the amazing panelists, and thank you, Georgia voters. We shocked the world in 2021 with the last Georgia runoff, and we got to do it one more time tomorrow. Our issue on the ballot, and we won't black down. Head over to blackvotersmatterfund.org /vote if you need to find your polling location before tomorrow. And that's it. So we'll see you guys at the polls. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Come on, Georgia, let's vote, 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 baby. We got to do it again. That's right. Call your neighbors and call your friends. Tell them tomorrow, December the 6th, we got to do it again, man. See y'all at the polls. But can't stop, won't stop. We on the ground, baby.